In this video tutorial, we're going to look at the forms or types of business organization as part of principles of business. So stay tuned. The different types of business organizations that we will be looking at in this lesson is sole trader, partnership, cooperative. We're going to look at companies, both private limited and public limited. We're going to look at multinational corporations. We're going to look at state corporations, nationalized industries, government departments, joint ventures, and franchise. You're required to know for each one what they are about and the advantages and disadvantages of each. So this lesson will take you through that. Before we actually get onto the different types of business organization though, we need to understand what is the public and private sector, because these are the two sectors in which the different types of business organization run on. So the public sector is that part or the sector of the economy, you can say, where government control the factors of production on behalf of citizens. The main motive is to provide services to citizens, and it consists of nationalized industries, executive agencies, local and municipal authorities, government departments, and corporations, public corporations. Right, so the public sector is basically that part of the economy that deals with the government solely. So everything is owned and run by the government in the public sector. In Trinidad and Tobago, the public sector is basically the branch where we can find all the government ministries, all the public corporations, regional corporations, etc. There are some advantages now of government and the public sector. So government provides public goods that the private sector will not provide. So public goods are like water, electricity, and waste disposal services. There are some private companies for waste disposal, but you will find that the public goods such as water and electricity comes from a government-run organization. In Trinidad, we have WASA and TNTEC. Government provides welfare services to the poorer members of society. So the government now in the public sector, their main revenue source is tax. So each citizen and business and transaction that involve tax, money is going to the government, which they use to provide all the welfare services and services to the general public, right? So tax, remember, tax is very important when it's looking at the public sector. So the third advantage is that the government sets a control mechanism on place for the conduct of business. What we mean by this now? So basically, businesses can operate freely in Trinidad and Tobago, but given the situation of the government that has a form of control and say over how business operate, these businesses now has to abide to the laws and the legislation of the land in order to operate. So I cannot open up a factory that handles harmful chemicals and don't follow disposal laws. I can get charged for that as a business owner. So the government in the public sector then, or the public sector, you can say, regulates business activity. There are some disadvantages, right? The first is that the government can increase taxes to finance expenditure. So remember, the government gets money from tax. So if they can collect tax, the more tax that they collect, the better off the government's position going to be where finance and revenues is concerned. The budget might be bigger as well, the budget that they work with. There's inefficient use of state resources. So sometimes the government and the public sector do not use resources in a manner that is capable of sustainability then. they just use to get. And sometimes they use it to get money from it, or they just use it without thinking for the future. And there's political interference in the private sector. So because the government comprises of the ministry, and by this parliament, it deals with the opposition and the government of the day. Therefore, there's a lot of political interferences, not only in the public sector, but it is also drawn across into the private sector. Remember, the public sector is very broad, but they need the private sector as well. So let's move on. The private sector is the other half of the economy then. And in the private sector, private individuals or businesses own the factors of production, which is land, labor, capital, and enterprise. You would have to learn about these in a later lesson. There's motive to maximize profit. So the private sector do not collect their revenues from tax like the public sector. The private sector basically work by profits. So the more money they make based on business transactions is the more that will grow the business, right? The private sector consists of all the business organizations we're going to talk about. Private sector consists of the sole trader, the partnership, the public and private companies, multinationals, conglomerates, and franchises. We have to look at each one in detail. There are some advantages of the private sector, and the first advantage is that it brings more competition and product variety to the market. It increases the use of technology and provides investment and employment. So because the private sector is always about making profit, they tend to always be up to date and advanced with technology because they need to be the most efficient in order to generate revenue. They also provide investment and employment. So they invest in the economy, and by this, these companies provide employment to the population. The only disadvantage, there are two main disadvantages of the private sector. And this is the fact that they will only provide products that citizens can pay for. So they work with demand and supply. So if a certain brand of laptop, right now any laptop, computers, tablets, etc. is in high demand because of the online schooling and education shift towards what we had before, right? So laptops and tablets and computers and PCs, etc. are in very high demand. So the private sector businesses now will focus on providing that for the people in which they are willing to pay for. Right now, even though a laptop may be $5,000 and out of someone's budget, the need for this computer is so high that the private sector has some form of say over it. We need to look at pricing strategy and demand and supply in later lessons, but this is to just tell you that the private sector has an upper hand coming to this. The next disadvantage is that it engages in the production of the merit goods once there is a demand. The merit goods are those goods that has no particular value then, in terms of we could do without it, but people will still buy it. So example of the merit goods are the ones that are considered unhealthy, right? Such as recreational drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, etc. Those are the merit goods. So you find a lot of people producing those goods, they exporting, importing, and trading off those goods. So the merit goods are those goods that are always in demand, I would say, but the public sector do not condone it. They literally tax it the most. So like you'll always see in the budget, the price of cigarettes going up by 100%, right? So if you pay $7 one year, next year you're going to pay $14 for the same cigarette because those are considered the merit goods, goods that are unhealthy, goods have no value, goods that we do not need, but people has their own personal issues with it. Okay, so we will continue. The features now of the private sector and the public sector can be classified under three objectives, right? We have ownership and control, objective, and source of capital. The first feature is ownership and control. In the private sector, as we can see, private citizens and individuals operate and own the private sector. Only person who purchase shares in a company are owners, right? So this is the private sector. In the public sector now, the state, national and local government, municipalities, the enterprise owned by taxpayers in general. So you can say everything about the public sector is owned by the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are the everyday citizens and businesses. In the private sector, the main objective is to earn and make a profit. However, in the public sector, is to provide a good or service, an essential good and service to the country. Goods and services doesn't really need to be water and electricity alone, but it can talk about welfare grants, different salary grants and so forth, and disability grants, HDC, housing and development, and so forth. The sources of capital in the private sector are shares bought by private individuals and persons, loans from banks, credit unions, friends, family members, and personal savings. In the public sector, there is taxes, rates, levies, and statutory deductions. There are loans from government institutions. So for example, the Agricultural Development Bank, the ADB, is a government organization that funds loans to farmers at a very low interest rate. Money and revenue generated from there as well. And then there are donor agencies, somebody who willingly sponsor the government. So these are the three features. We have ownership and control, objective, and source of capital. And these three features are different when we speak about the public and the private sector. So we move on now to our first business type, and the easiest business type then. We're looking at a sole trader or sole proprietorship, and we'll get into knowing what they are. The sole trader is a single business owner. This person may employ several other persons to work in the organization, but he or she has to make all decisions, acquire all the capital required and other resources needed for the business on its own. An example of a sole trader, as we can see on the screen on the pictures here, there is a plumber, a hairdresser, and a farmer. Now, a sole trader business is one of the easiest business to register because it only takes one person, right? The hairdresser, she may have the skill to style and cut and deal with hair, nails, and skin. So she might open up her own single business or sole trader business or sole proprietorship by just cutting hair, okay? She will start with her own capital, and her capital is mainly a loan, maybe a loan from the bank, her personal savings, and so forth. But she will provide a service to people. She will have her customers. From then, she can hire someone to help her. She can hire somebody to be a cleaner. She can hire an accountant. Does not matter. She is still the sole owner, okay? The main characteristics of sole trading is the fact that he or she manages the business, may have the help of friends and family. So, for example, the farmer, we see at the bottom there on the screen, he may be the sole owner. He may invest all his money in bringing out crops and so forth, but he may carry his children or his family members to help him reap the crops, pack the crops, sell the crops maybe. The good thing about sole trading as well is the fact that The sole trader enjoys all the profits, but the downside to it, they also bear all the risk. So if you open a business and let's say you have to face a pandemic like what's going on now, there are businesses that were forced to shut down, such as hairdressing, tuition, right? But we all find ways and means to get it over with, okay? And there are still businesses that can open or run. Hairdressers, barbershops, and so forth were severely affected. So by this, they had to suffer all the risk of what was happening because they are the owners. And yes, they may call it profits, but in times like this, they suffer the risk as well. Capital is limited since the saving of the owner fund the business. So sole traders are usually limited to capital because there's only one person who usually invests in the business or take a loan to start the business, whereas other business types. One of the characteristics of sole trading is the fact that a sole trader has personal contact with clients, okay? So this hairdresser we speak about earlier can have a relationship with every single one of her clients. So Mary's coming to cut her hair on Monday. She knows everything about Mary because that is her customer. The next characteristics we'll look at is the fact that they perform a large variety of tasks related to the operations of business. So even though they are one-person business, they still have all the tasks involved in running a business as with a bigger organization. So this type of business is not incorporated, not given a separate identity. Therefore, it is easy to set up. The sole trading business can be established within one day. However, in corporations and companies and limited companies, limited liability companies, which we'll go on to later, is more stringent and it is very hard to just wake up one day and decide to register a business. You have to follow certain laws and procedures. However, with this, there are exemptions when it comes to a sole trader. Right, there's different examples of sole trading, and these are electrician, a plumber, small farmers, and even doctors and lawyers. A doctor or lawyer is included, I know, and people often demise sole trading as a coconut vendor or a seamstress, but doctors and lawyers are included in this because if they had to open up their own private practice, they would be considered sole traders. The formation of sole trader or sole trading business is very easy because there are no legal formalities in setting up of a business as the sole trader, except for the registration of a trade name or acquisition of a license. So here in Trinidad and Tobago, if you are to open a bar, for example, you are a sole trader and you open a bar, you need special license, okay? One, you have to register your business and look for a name that no one else has. You have to run name searches in order to acquire your name. And two, you cannot sell alcohol without a liquor license, and this is something that you need to get. So, for example, a license is required for the sale of alcohol or for the sale of food items. So if I want to open up a little restaurant or a little place that sells food, I cannot just get up one day and open it. I can, but it will be illegal then because I must have a food badge in order to sell food items. So sole traders the sole trading business come with advantages, okay? One, the sole trader enjoys all profits. So if $1,000 is made for the day, the sole trader enjoys that alone. It is ease of formation since there is no legal requirement. There is independence, so find personal satisfaction in working for themselves. It is a simple organizational structure. It may be just, for example, the owner at the very top and a worker. That's about it. Right, so the owner is at the top and the worker is at the bottom. And this is the line of communication as well. If the owner has more than one worker, then we can just draw more boxes. And this is as simple as the structure gets. Okay? So this is just an example structure I'm showing you here. There's personal control where decision making happens. So decision making tends to be faster because there's nobody to consult. Personal services that you can't get from a large company. There's secrecy. No need to disclose info except to tax authorities or to creditors. And there's personal commitment to succeed. So this part here, when we talk about secrecy, if you're a public limited company or private limited company, sometimes you have to publish your financial statements for transparency reasons. A sole trader don't have to do this. So there's a form of secrecy and privacy where finances are concerned. There are disadvantages, however, of a sole trader business. The first disadvantage is that they are limited in the sources of finance. Okay? Financing of a sole trading business is mainly due because of profits coming in from previous transactions or from via bank loans, personal savings, and some sole traders even go as to sell their own assets to try and accumulate money for a business. There's over reliance upon one's personal health and vigor, and I can bank fully on this. Having a private school and a lessons place is not all simple as it seems. I give up a lot of my sleep. I work 24 hours because sometimes we have classes and then we have to record and then we have to prepare. So work is done throughout. And sometimes I may feel ill because of this, because of the stress involved sometimes. A next disadvantage is unlimited liability. They have unlimited liability, so basically where finances is concerned, they could only have so much. Lack of leisure time. You find a lot of business owners tend to have less time for themselves and their family than a person who has an 8 to 4 job. There's lack of technology. I would dispute this particular disadvantage because we live now in a technological era. Look at all those tuition places. We are forced now to use computers to make videos, to go fully online. And he bears all the risks. So the sole trader bears all the risks. So if you take your personal savings and you open up a business and in 3 months' time the business flop and you lose all his life savings, that is one risk you are willing to bear by yourself. Okay? So we're moving on. We move on now to the second type of business organization, and this type is called partnership. And very simply, as you can see here, a partnership is a business formed legally by a minimum of 2 and a maximum of 20 persons in a business. So a partnership is a business formed with 2 to 20 persons. There are two types of partnership that are formed. We have limited liability partnership and unlimited liability partnership. Limited liability partnership is where at least one partner must have unlimited liability. Unlimited liability partnership is all partners have unlimited liability. The partnership, however, has special formations in place before it can actually get started. So you're registering as a business just like a sole trader, But when it comes to the partnership now, the formation is a little bit different. So whether it be limited liability or unlimited liability partnership, and I didn't mention to you, maybe you should have known this by now based on previous lesson, that unlimited liability means the full legal responsibility that business owners and partners assume for all debts. So if you owe $100,000 in debts, that is your limit. So you are limited to that. Unlimited liabilities mean you can have any amount of debts. So let's go back to the formation now. So we are here. So a partnership deed or a deed of partnership must be drafted out, which sets out the terms and conditions of a partnership. So this is a written agreement to help settle disputes in the absence of the deed. A partnership will be governed by a partnership act. A partnership act is a general document that may be placed forward by, for example, the Ministry of Legal Affairs to help govern partnerships that were brought about without deeds. But a very important partnership deed is a requirement because it helps in the long run of the business. A partnership deed will entail the number of partners, the amount of capital contributed by each partner, the type of trade engaged in, share of profits, the name of the partnership, and the salary of each partner, mechanism for the solution. Okay, so the partnership deed has a lot of things that will help the business in the long run. So it specifies the number of partners and what they contributed to start the business. So for example, Tom and Jerry decided to start a partnership. The names will be specified as Tom and Jerry, and if Jerry submitted to the business $500,000, that is his contribution. And if Tom sacrificed $200,000 and invested it in the business, that is his contribution for capital. The type of trade they engage in means the type of businesses that they tend to go into. So it may be a garage, it may be a food place, or whatever partnership it is, you need to specify the business activity in the partnership deed. There's a share of profit and losses accruing to each partner. The share of profits and losses are basically set up by a ratio. So let's say Jerry, Tom, and Jerry. So Tom invested 200,000. I'm just going to put K for short. And Jerry invested 500,000. Then we can say the ratio to collect profits and losses will be 2 to 5. So Jerry will get 2 parts of the profit, and Tom will get 2 parts of the profit and Jerry will get 5. Okay? The name of the partnership, so it might be Tom and Jerry's mechanical garage. The salary for each partner, so every month each partner will get paid based on a specified salary, whether it be 10,000, 3,000, depends. And they're supposed to be separated and mechanism for dissolution. So how, in the event that the business must close or close down, how are they going to dissolute the partners? How are they going to share up the assets and the liabilities in order to close off this business? So the partnership agreement or the partnership deed is very, very important to a partnership. There are different types of partners in a partnership. They are the ordinary, the general partners, and they take an active part in the running of the business. So they are the partners that are there every day and toiling behind the business. Then we have the unlimited liability of partners, where the change of members and partnership, the assets and liabilities are owned and shared equally. Each partner plays an important part in the management of the firm, and the partners cannot exist without an agreement. Then there are the sleeping partners, and they invest in the business too, but they do not take part in the business activity. So for example, in Tom and Jerry's garage, I can invest $50,000 and not be a part of the business, but I get a part of what is coming in. Because I invested money in the business, I can get revenue from it or interest based on the business transaction that was conducted. And then we have limited liability partners. And this means that assets will not be lost if the business goes bankrupt, right? Limited liability of partners, but one must have unlimited liabilities. A change in member does not mean an end in the partnership. So because we have a partnership, if one member drops out and we add another member, that does not end the partnership. And limited liability partners does not play a part in the management of the firm. They don't really make the decision. They are just there because they invested money. And they may play a role in decision making, but in the everyday running of the business, you wouldn't find them there. There are several advantages of partnership. Because we have more than one pool and resources to start a business, we have more capital. There is the opportunity for specialization. So partners use their different skills and knowledge. So for example, in Tom and Jerry's garage, Tom might be a straightener and painter. However, Jerry might be very skilled and versed in mechanics. It is a simple organization, meaning it is easy to form. Once you specify the details such as the partner's name, the type and the nature of the business, the salary and the share for the profits and the losses, and you form your deed, it's very easy from there. There's continuity. More continuity than a sole trader. So remember, in a sole trading business, if the sole trader dies, chances are the business is going to end with the sole trader's death. However, in a partnership, if one person dies, the business can still continue because there are other people that work through the same objective. There's limited liability, and very important, the workload is shared. So seeing that there's a partnership now, everything that should be done in the business is now shared among the members. Then we have decision making. Decision making shares knowledge and expertise. So there's good decision making in a sense that all partners or different partners may have different skills and expertise who they can add value now to the decision making. We now have the disadvantages of partnerships. There are many different disadvantages of partnership. The first is that there is unlimited liability. The second is that they are binding. All partners lose if one mistake is made. So if Jerry happens to cause, by accident, a fire with his chemicals that he used to straighten and paint, it's going to affect Tom. Limited capital. There's cause for disagreement and conflict. Remember, conflict arises with different people when there's more than one people involved. Then we have the concentrated risk. Risk not spread enough. So risk in the business is not just settled to one person, it goes throughout the board. Decision making is also a disadvantage. Even though it is an advantage in terms of shared knowledge and expertise, it is a disadvantage. Too much people making a decision can cause problems. It's going to cause problems because nobody might come to an agreement, and the time to make one simple decision is going to be very long. We have continuity, which is broken partnership upon death. So even though we have continuity, the partnership may not be as equal to what it was when the partner was alive. Profits are shared irrespective of efforts in the absence of a partnership agreement. Profits are shared not because of the amount of work somebody does in the partnership, but the amount of money invested in the partnership. So that's a big setback. So imagine Tom is going every single day, Monday to Sunday, trying to work his way, and Jerry's coming in twice a week and collecting more money. We move on now to cooperatives, and we will see what they are now. These are business entities owned by members who purchase shares to join with them, right? So members A membership scheme then is what makes up cooperative. So once you buy a share within this company, you automatically is a member and you are a owner. They are usually established because of the need existing among a number of persons who wish to acquire a particular good. So there's some common bond between these people that buy shares because they have the same need, okay? And they're getting it at a good service and a reasonable cost. So they all buy shares into this company and become members. So principles of cooperatives, it is open membership. Anybody over the age of 16 can join. There is democratic control, governed by its owners who attend a general meeting when members elect a committee to run the cooperative. Limited interest on capital investment, low interest rates for members. So because you are part of them, you have low interest rates. The distribution of surpluses. Surpluses are distributed among members fairly, plowed back into business and to expand and sometimes used for healthcare or education. There are different types of cooperatives. There are consumer, producer cooperative, financial cooperatives, services, and worker cooperatives. For example, members of a credit union purchase shares in these entities in order to obtain at low interest rates. Okay? So for example, we have the Eastern Credit Union, we have the Police Credit Union, UB has their credit union. Basically, when a member joins, they usually join by buying shares, and within that, they are entitled to get low interest loans in education, in cars, in mortgages, etc. There are several types of cooperatives. For example, there's retail or consumer cooperative, and producer cooperatives. The shares invested in a retail cooperative are used to buy goods in bulk at a very low cost and then resold to its members. So for example, of a retail cooperative is PriceMart. PriceMart is a large retailer and they have membership shopping. So basically you buy a membership card and based on this you become a member of their company. And because of this, the owner now is able to buy bulk goods at a very low cost and resell them to the members at a very affordable rate. So sometimes you go to PriceMart and you might find 6 tin of tuna for $20. But when you go to a grocery, 6 tin of tuna may come up to close to $40. And this is how we see the advantage of being in a cooperative. So producer cooperative may include a group of farmers who will obtain raw materials at low cost. Okay? Profits are distributed to members based on the amount of goods that they buy and not the amount of investment that they make in the business. So if you buy more goods from the place that you are a member of, it becomes better for you as a consumer and better for the business itself as a distributor, because they are now selling a larger volume and you are getting it at a very cheap cost. Okay? At the annual general meeting, shareholders elect their management committees from among their members and vote on proposals put forward. Benefits of being a cooperative are therefore obtaining goods and services at low cost and a guaranteed market, as members are also customers. Okay, so once I know I'm a member of this place, I will always go and contribute. A disadvantage is that management may be inexperienced and they are chosen from their membership. So you might be a member of this place but have no management experience and become a member and a member in the management team. There are several advantages of cooperative and they create employment for members. They are democratic management, meaning it's free and open. They benefit from the economies of scale because they now buy in bulk and get at cheaper cost. Okay, we have to do economies of scale. Support services such as purchasing and marketing for members, and profits are shared among members. So if there is a 2% interest on a particular share, it applies across the board to all members. There are disadvantages of cooperatives, however. There are limited input depending on the size of the cooperative or the credit union, and they may lack managerial expertise in membership, as we said before. We move on now to limited liability companies. A company, there's the definition right here. A company is a business entity that has been incorporated. That is, the company has a separate legal entity from its owner. So the owner is not bound to the company then. The owner and the company are two different legal entities. So when you have a company, someone can sue your company, but they cannot sue the owner. You can take a loan out on a company, but it does not affect the owner, right? Limited liability companies are companies in which shareholders, investors are protected as they will not lose their personal assets. So limited liability. So if I have a company and it goes bankrupt, whatever is in the company will be used to settle, not my home, not my house, not my car, none of my assets, okay? They are not liable for the debts of the company beyond their level of investment. Therefore, if a shareholder buys a share in a company valued at $5,000, then he will only lose that $5,000 invested and not his personal asset. There are two types of limited liability companies, and there is the public limited company and the private limited company. The private limited company only allows friends, relatives, and co-workers to purchase shares and to be a part of the company. Its privacy is also protected by the fact that, unlike public limited company, it does not have to publish their balance sheet in the newspaper. Sometimes when you open the newspaper, you see financial statements for different government companies, such as WASA, TNTech, National Gas Company, and so forth. Because they have a public status, they have to upload their financials to the newspaper for public scrutiny and transparency issues. The public limited companies now allows members of the public to purchase shares. The shares or stocks of public limited companies are traded in the stock market. The public limited liability has a minimum of 7 members, and there is no limit to the number of shareholders that can join. So if you look at the board of directors for a public limited company, you'll only see 7 members, up to 7 members or less. But the shareholding capacity is very broad. There are legal procedures for both these types of companies, and are lengthy as they must submit the several documents, right? The Company Act contains the law relating to the company. So before we had partnership that has a partnership deed, companies act with 2 major documents: the Memorandum of Association and the Articles of Association. So the Memorandum of Association deals with the internal aspect of the organization. Okay? Internal meaning the company name, address, objective of the company, statement that the liability of the shareholders is limited, and authorized share capital and the types of shares to be issued. Articles of Association are something different. They deal with the external nature of the company. Okay? And external means everything outside. So procedures call for calling the annual general meeting, rights and obligations of the directors, procedures governing the election of a director, statement concerning the borrowing power of the company, procedures dealing with the payments of dividends. There's also statement of authorized, registered, or nominal capital, and this is the amount stated in the Memorandum of Association, which is the maximum amount which a company is authorized to raise. So the statement of authorization and nominal capital is stated underneath the Memorandum of Association. Then we have the prospectus. The prospectus is an invitation to the public to buy shares in a public company. It contains detailed information, enables investors to estimate the prospects, and it is important to the public and should not be misled. So the prospectus is mainly there for public limited companies, not too much private limited companies. We have statutory declaration, which is another document, and these are commonly used to allow a person to declare something to be true for the purposes of satisfying some legal requirement or regulation. There's a certificate of incorporation. So sometimes they find a company name with INC or Inc at the end. That means it is an incorporation. This is a legal document relating to the formation of a company or corporation. It is a license to form a corporation issued by state government. Its precise meaning depends upon the legal system in which it is used. Then there's certificate of trading. It is a certificate issued by the Registrar of Companies to the public limited company to grant permission to commence its business. The private limited companies may begin trading after receiving the certificate of incorporation, but the public limited company must issue a prospectus inviting public to subscribe for shares before certificate of trading is issued. So the certificate of trading is something that both public and private have, but it is handled differently then in terms of issuing. There are advantages and disadvantages of each type. So let's go with the advantages of the private limited company. The advantage, a larger capital based on a sole trader or partnership. The company has continuity and thus can obtain loans easily. The company has a separate legal identity from the owner. We talk about this. The owner and the company are two different people. So if the business goes bankrupt, it does not affect the owner. Shareholders have limited liability. We have disadvantages now. Capital is limited since the membership is only limited to 50%. Must file report with the Registrar of Companies. So they have to file report with the Registrar of Companies in order to be substantiated. Selling of shares is restricted to only the private group, such as family members and people of that category. Now we move on to the advantages of the public limited company, and it is easier to obtain financing. Shareholders have limited liabilities. Share can be quoted on the stock exchange and sold to the public. Company is able to grow and obtain the economies of scale by enjoying bulk buying and goods. It is a separate legal existence. Changes in shareholders and directors, however, do not affect the company. So one year we might have a director, the next year we have a next one, but that do not affect the running. Now we have disadvantages of public limited companies. The legal requirement may be costly and time consuming. The accounts have to be made public because it is public money and public shares and people from the public that are made up the shareholding capacity of this company. Because of large size, decision making can be long. Differences in opinions may develop owners and directors. Loss of control of company is sufficient shares are obtained. So if I have more share in a public company than another person, he can lose control because I have the capability and the power of ownership. And these companies lack a personal element. It's not really, it is part of the public, so it's not really something that is kept under the curtain. Now we move on to multinational corporations. Multinational corporation is a company that has a headquarter in one home country and operates in businesses in several host countries. An example of a multinational corporation are the famous Shell, KFC, and Digicel. Nestle is one of the major multinational corporations in Trinidad and Tobago. They have their headquarters in Switzerland. However, they have several businesses in host countries such as Trinidad and Tobago. And they come with advantages. Multinationals provide employment, okay? Not because they're a foreign company, they keep their people. They hire the locals in the host countries. They introduce advanced technology. So Nestle would have top-notch equipment for packaging, bottling, and mixing milk and so forth. However, a local company such as Ramsar and Dairy Products may not have this level of advanced technology. So they introduce this to the market so others can develop, adopt, and proceed. They provide well-needed goods and services. So Digicel provides communication technology. Nestle is one of the leading suppliers of milk, especially baby milk. There are disadvantages. Profits are earned and repatriated to the main center. So even though they use the local resources, the local people, etc., the money made always goes back to the home country. They may exploit the workers by paying low wages and having them work long hours. And they cause unemployment when they close down to take advantage of cheaper labor and lower operational costs in another country. So one of the main reasons multinational companies set up in the first place is because it was cheap to do so, right? It has a readily available source of cheap labor. They operate based on a budget, but they operate using the factors of production, which is also very economical to them in terms of operating. Okay, so Nestle may use the local dairy farms to obtain milk. Yes, there's disadvantages because the dairy farms have a constant business, but at the end of the day, they may pay next to nothing. I'm not saying that they do. We move on now to state corporations. These are independent organizations that are set up by the government to carry out a service. So the government does not control their daily operation, but can fix the overall strategy and nominate their board of directors. They are usually non-profit making, but in the long term, they have to be self-financing. State corporations are usually in the broadcasting field, such as TTT, transportation, such as PTSC, and power and telecommunications, such as the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. In terms of formation, we have the state corporations are formed by legislation. So they are formed due to the passing of a law in Parliament. So this is very different from the other companies we have been looking at. In terms of management, the government appoints a board of governor or director for a stipulated time frame. And every time a new director has to be there, it must be appointed to head each organization, and it is done so by the government. There are many characteristics of state corporation, and one of the main characteristics here is that funding is done by state providing grants, although some legislation allows the company or the corporation or the organization to raise their own funds. The state or state-appointed auditors monitor all accounting procedures. So the accounts in state corporations are mainly done from public sector accounting procedures specified in the legislation as compared to private accounting. Okay, the annual accounting report must be sent to the Auditor General, and the Auditor General is somebody who is at the forefront of the finances for the government. The aim of the state is not to make profit, but it is expected that these corporations may break even, right? So they're not there to make profit, they are there to simply help provide the services that the state or the public sector wants to offer to the citizens. We now look at nationalized industries. Nationalized industries are firms that were once privately owned but are now taken over by the government. So governments seek to nationalize key industries on which government depends on for the company's survival or economic survival. For example, Trinidad's oil industry or a bauxite industry in Jamaica, you find the government tend to buy over these companies to be a part of it because it generally toils with the main resources of the country and the government depends widely on it. Formation of this type of company is when the government purchased majority of the shares. So for example, Petrotrain was a once private public company, but the government had full say because they had majority of shares in that company. In terms of management now, like state corporation, a board of governors is appointed. The board reports to the line minister. The executive director heads the company. The audited accounting report of these companies must be paid by the Auditor General or the government accounting firm. So just like state corporation, these financial records go to the Auditor General, and they have specific characteristics. They are legal entities. The state is the only shareholder, nobody else, and they are managed by a board of directors that are appointed by state. There are advantages of nationalized industries. State has ownership and control, hence profit remain in the country. The company is a better position to serve the needs of the community. For example, funding a project in education. Nationalization prevents private monopolies from being formed. So there is not one private person dominating the market, but now the government has a say in it. Disadvantages now, they pay relatively low salaries to executive directors and may not attract the best expertise because of this. The industries may drain on the government's revenues. So they depend now on the government's revenues, which are the tax-paying money, for survival. We look at a very small aspect now of types of business organization that falls in the public sector, and these are government departments. These include government ministries such as the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Education, and a minister is usually appointed and in charge of each ministry. So when Dr. Keith Rowley won election recently, he appointed his ministers in different ministries. These departments are very important to the running of the government. So there are local and municipal authorities and government bodies which are run by elected local officials. Okay? And these bodies is what is put in place for the delivery of the public goods to the public, right? So the Ministry of Health will provide the health care for the population. The Ministry of Education will provide the educational resources to the population. The Ministry of Finance will aid in terms of distributing money throughout and handling the budget. And these government departments are there to clean, to fix the community roads, etc. So all the bodies falling under these ministries of road of transport and so forth, falls under this type. Now we look at joint ventures. A joint venture or JV is a business arrangement in which two or more parties agree to pool their resources for the purpose of accomplishing a specific task. The task may be a new project or a joint venture. So joint or other business activity. So joint venture are not really long-term. It can end when the project is complete, and each participant is responsible for profits, loss, and cost that is associated with it. Joint ventures are not really long-term in some points. They are usually dissoluted after the purpose or the objective has been carried out. There are advantages of joint venture, and there's the first one, new insights and expertise. So starting a joint venture gives you an opportunity to merge with someone who has an insight or expertise, right? So for example, if I have a business and I need a complete revamp in the technological aspect of my business, I can form a joint venture with a very powerful technological company, a company that governs technology, and I will get them to do the project of revamping this sector of my business. And when the deal is done, they are done. It's short-term partnership. So they have better resources. Forming a joint venture will give you access to better resources such as specialized staff and technology, right? And it is only temporary, so it does not last forever. So if something goes wrong, you won't be committing to it long term. Both parties share risk and cost. In case a joint group project fails, you are not the only one bearing the cost of its failure. The volunteer or the joint to your company will also feel the brunt of it. We have disadvantages now of joint venture. We have vague objectives. So the objective of a joint venture are not 100% clear and rarely communicated clearly. It is flexible and can be restricted. So because you now join and merge with another business, your focus tend to lose or stray away from your business, but more so the new agreement that has been formed. There's no such thing as equal involvement, and equal pay may be impossible, but it's extremely unlikely for all companies working together to share the same involvement, and great imbalance. So because different companies work together, there's a great imbalance of expertise, assets, and investment, and this can have a negative impact on the effectiveness of this joint venture. Finally, now we look at franchises. Franchises is easy to remember. A franchise is an agreement between a franchisee or the person requesting permission to set up a business and a parent company to allow the franchisee to sell the products and services. Some businesses begin by the owner acquiring a franchise to operate under an already existing business name. So for example, in Trinidad, we have KFC. KFC is a franchise of a parent company, KFC, that is in the United States, in Kentucky, right? Prestige Holdings in Trinidad and Tobago buy the rights from KFC to operate a branch of KFC in Trinidad and Tobago, okay? And by this, they must abide to all rules and guidelines outlined by the parent company. So because they are operating in Trinidad, they have to follow the rules and regulations by the head company. And they must pay a royalty or a fee to the parent company to operate and use this business name. So advantages of franchises now. The access to new markets for the franchisor. Sources of revenue for the franchisor. The franchisee bears some of the risk. So if I pay to get the rights from a parent company and I've opened up a business in my country and it does not meet. A classic example was what was McDonald's in the 1990s and early 2000s. Because of McDonald's failure to adopt to the culture of Trinidad and Tobago, they failed, okay? And they now open back and they are now taking into consideration the culture and so forth. So they provide and support training now, and the franchisee's risk is reduced because it's selling a recognized brand. So one of the main disadvantages now is that the franchisee must pay the royalties regardless of the business size. So if I have a very small business and I using the name, the brand name, I still have to pay the same fee the bigger business who is using the name is paying. The franchisee has to operate under supervision of the franchisor. And the franchisee is legally bound to sell only the products of the franchisor. So you cannot go to KFC and get a roti, right? They have to sell what is specified for them to sell. So this takes us to the end of this lesson on types of business organization. I hope throughout that you have paused the video and make your necessary notes, because these notes in this video are very comprehensive and concise notes that will help you study. So I urge you to pause the video and take it down. So again, reread your notes and answer all questions that I have put in the forum under this particular topic. So thank you so much for watching this video tutorial on the types of business organizations. I do hope you understand and appreciate the knowledge that has been passed on. Thank you.